I think for some artists, it's something to do perhaps, or it's a part of a profession that they're looking at doing. In my case, I think it's more of a calling, much like the priesthood. It's something I feel the need to do. Whether I made money at it or not, it's something that I felt the need to do. That's a loaded question. um, I'm hoping to add on the tradition of painting historically, and add on to that. And hopefully I'm going to pass on works that in the future people will look at and perhaps learn from and have a better understanding of the craft of painting. Well, my main medium is oil, but I use quite a bit of watercolor, pastel, dry mediums like tempera and charcoal, for example. Um, Egg tempera, of course. I would have to say the oil is, of all the mediums, is the most versatile, lush medium there is, and has such a range that it's hard to falter. And so, for that medium alone, it's both challenging and yet, when you get it right, it's very fruitful. That's a long question, actually, but in a short, short paragraph, I would have to say, um, you're looking at a bunch of sketches, studies, much. Sometimes there's mathematics involved in terms of placement, and the subject matter within a given space, for example, and the process of working it up with the ideas can take months. And the actual work itself may take months, if not longer. And so there's a lot involved within the studio work itself. Well, think of the studio work as a long distance runner. Uh, you know, uh, you can evolve ideas through the process over a long period of time. Um, And plein-air is, think of it like a sprint. You have to react to what's happening outside in nature, and you'll find that both of them help each other. Plein-air helps you develop a quickness that you could add to your studio work as you're developing, and the studio work adds to the plein-air work because it forces you to slow down and really think about putting down a mark, and both sides help each other. Without one or the other, for example, if you weren't doing plein-air work, chances are in the studio you would lose some of that freshness or some of that. There'd be a labored look to the studio work sometimes because of the process. And so by developing plein-air work or that quickness, you would be able to get some of that, at least some of that feel or aspect of design across in the studio work. And that helps the freshness of the application of paint. The subjects, they vary. I do a lot of landscape, but I think it's a mistake to do just a subject. I do portraiture, figurative work, um, just to name a couple more there. There's also still life, which I love doing. But landscape to me has the most difficulty because of the subject matter and it's quite demanding. But to be good at, say, landscape, one should do the figure. To be good at the figure, one should do still life. To be good at still life, one should do the portrait. In other words, if you just stick to one, you're just going to be good at one. By cross-sectioning, this will enable you to pick up different techniques and different way of thinking and moving your brush across. I think it's going to come down to what the piece feels or means to you. So sometimes the title might be a little bit more abstracted, a little bit more poetic. It's often, in most cases, not just directly what it might seem. And there's usually a different meaning, through the title, what the work means to me. So it's not just direct, but it's interpretive. All of them in a way. It's a tough one, right? I'm proud of each of them for different reasons, right? But on a technical aspect alone, I'd have to say, for example, my sunset behind me, I'm very proud of, because it took everything out of me to develop, that scene, technically, aesthetically, and that was developed over a 5 months period. So you're looking at averaging 50 hours a week for 5 months. And sometimes it doesn't take as long, sometimes it may take longer, but I think people have to keep in mind these processes can take quite a while, and many of the ideas may formulate 10, 20 years prior to actually doing the work. It's a mix. I mean, some of the work can be, it's more traditional, using a bravado sort of method of approach, which means, the brush marks are assured and the movements are quite strong. From that to something more subtle or impressionistic. So it ranges within that. But some of the subjects demand much more finer take on it. For example, a much more layered, more smoother approach to get the aesthetics across. So it's a cross section depending on the subject, not so much the mythology. Oh, do you have a book? I mean, off the head, there would be Constable, there'd be Andrew Wyeth, Colville, Rothko, for example, the great abstractionist, Klein. I'm across the board for that. I love and I steal as much as I can from others, and and certainly, as my contemporaries go, I learned a lot working with someone else. For example, like Lisa Visage, when working outdoors, for example. I'm always stealing as much as I can from her. And I think it's a good idea to keep stealing as much as you can, because that's the way of growth. And if you don't look to the past particularly, you can't go forward. If you have life experiences, whether it be negative or positive, they're going to influence the way you think, you interpret your world around you, and your thoughts. And so that's going to carry on into your art. We don't live in a vacuum. So, for example, a really good example is Alex Scoville. He was a war artist. And when he came back, you could see in his art, although it wasn't direct, indirectly, it certainly affected his work and the way he thought about things. And so it depends on your experiences, and that's going to come across in your work. Florence. One word I can use there was Florence. I mean, I was trained in the States, but when I went to Florence, it was really quite a profound experience, because it changed the way I looked at things. I was able to stay there, for about a year, live there, and you live with paintings, you live with architecture, you just live with history. So it made a big difference. And this is something that we lack here. It's culture and history that certainly Europe has, or other countries have. Yeah, definitely. To be a painter, and to be, how would one say, not necessarily successful, but to get the job done, you have to have discipline. You know, it won't get done by itself. Looking at it, you can't afford to be lazy, right? So so that carries over into other parts of your life. Discipline, having routine, those things. Some parts are going to carry over, certainly. That's a tough question in a way. I mean, I've had at least 25 years of professional experience selling as well, and so over a period of time, the paintings generally sit where they sit in terms of where they have sold before, in terms of its history and such. Some artists or some galleries will do it by the inch. I don't think much of that method personally. Um, you know, for example, if you did it by the inch, a Vermeer wouldn't be worth much, would it? And so, I might as well get a big roller and a canvas and just move it around, right, and sell it by the inch that way. No, I think it has to be personally interpreted upon the work, regardless of its size, the aesthetic, the content, and the skill level to pull it off. So some of those criteria have to be or should be put into the work, not just merely on the size itself. Well, if you look at the auctions, for example, what they're selling and what they have sold for ridiculous money. Um, Nuts. I mean, that's the only word I can think of. On the other hand, there's some interesting works that are coming out. One of the influences, of course, is the digital age. There's a lot of mediocrity that's being moved about as well because of it. But there's a lot of interesting work that's being done as well because of that because of that collaboration, so to speak, and people can see more works of each other, and which influences, or drives things across. I'm not really sure on that in terms of the overall effect what it will have in long term. I'm hoping that the skill levels will improve overall, but I'm doubtful. Digital age has a tendency to make one lazy. More and more people are doing this rather than doing this. Humans by nature take the easiest route usually. It's not necessarily the best route, but by general they'll take the easiest route. And so hopefully there will always be small pockets of people doing these skilled and certainly high level of painting and interpretation. The problem now is that we're bombarded. I mean, think of the early part of 20th century, 19th century. I could easily argue that the average person in the 19th century had better understanding of what they were looking at in terms of paint, in terms of understanding craft than we do now. We have digital, we have TV, we have media. We're constantly being bombarded and influenced, and our attention span is a few seconds now rather than a few hours or a few minutes. So I don't think it's good in the long term. I think it's going to be unhealthy in terms of its overall development. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Something that has meaning, hopefully, and something that will stand the test of time. I mean, when you think of Rembrandt, or you look at his work, or Rubens, or any of those painters, they're valid today as they were then, simply because they've, they had, their work has stood the test of time. And I think overall that's what I'm hoping for, but who knows?